In today's video, we're going to be drawing a Japanese tiger. Hello everyone, I'm Daggett, this is Daggett Designs, and welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video, we're going to be drawing a Japanese style tiger. So I've had a lot of requests for this one, I really hope you enjoy it. Let's get straight into it by going to the overhead. Okay everyone, welcome back to the table. So we're starting off with A3 sketch paper, a mechanical pencil for sketching our design, and an eraser should we need it. So looking at drawing our tiger, I'm going to have the face and the bottom claws or the front claws of the tiger here, and he's going to be climbing down from the back of our design here. So I'm going to start off with mapping out a space for our head. Now I'm just going to drop in an oval shape to start with. Something like this around this size will give us a good shape for the top portion of our head. And I want to cut that off close to the top with a curved line that cuts across and then curves down like this. That's going to be the line that our eyes will sort of sit on. Now close to the front of this line, towards the left here, I'm going to come down and forward with a line like this. That line can cut directly back on the same angle as our eye line there. And then to join that up, you're just going to do a couple of smaller lines towards the bottom to give us a little triangle shape like this. Now, once you've gotten this little triangle shape, we can start to split this off. So just coming from the center, splitting towards the right with a line like this, overlapping that line and coming up and around like this. You want to bring this out nice and wide, and you can sort of play around with it a little bit later on. But I think that's probably not wide enough. So I'll just bring that out a little bit more like this. And then little overlapping lines just coming around the top on that side like that. And you can do the same thing from the other side, just coming out like that. Looping out from underneath it. And then coming around to the outside of our little nose shape there. Now what you're going to do is you're going to drop down and slightly back. And you're going to put in an oval, which is going to be like this sort of shape. So it's long up and down ways and a bit skinnier on the sides. And I'm going to cut that oval into two as well. And I need that to be a little bit lighter. So you can always go in and erase little bits like that and lighten them up so it's a bit easier to see. And then we're going to do a little line at the very bottom of that oval that curves up like this, the opposite direction to the bottom of our large oval there. And at the back of this, you can do another oval shape. This will give us like our cheek portion of our jaw. Now at the back of the head, we're going to use this line for a reference. That's going to be the center roughly of our ear, maybe the bottom half of our ear. So just coming from the top portion of the head here, coming down with a little curved line, and then coming back around with another curved line, with this line sort of running down the center of that ear. From here you can drop in your eye structure, so just coming up above this part of our muzzle here, and I'm going to drop in an oval quite large just underneath our line, pretty much in contact with our line there. And then above that you're going to do like a little jelly bean shape, so just coming around the front, across the top, and back around like this. On the outside portion of the head, there'll be another jelly bean shape like that, but you'll only see part of it, so just draw in a little curve for the time being. Alright, so at this point you've got your head mapped in. We're going to start dropping in shapes for our body. So just starting off with a line that comes back off of where the head is for the sort of top section of our back. That can loop around to this side here, and then just flick off and around for the tail like that. So there should be this line that runs continuously down the back, loops around and into our tail. And of course we can change this as we go if necessary. We're going to start by adding in our rib cage sort of section. So or the bulk of the body there. So adding in this sort of curve at the top, fairly close to our central line there. And then we're going to bring that around a little bit wider coming down to the front here. Like this. That'll give us the main bulk of our body. And from here you can drop in your right shoulder. I like to do the shoulders nice and large, so just dropping in a big circle behind our head there. it's going to be, you know, fairly tightly tucked up into the shoulder area behind the head. Now coming back off our shoulder, you can draw a line that comes up. I'll draw a little circle shape in for our elbow. And you want to make these features fairly large as well. You are doing a tiger, they've got really big strong limbs. And then you can bring that line down. I want to keep it fairly close to our shoulder here. Bringing that line down and forward. And then putting in another large oval shape. Not quite as big as our shoulder, but still fairly large. That's going to give us our paw. And then you can start from the left side of that with small ovals coming forward and around to give you the individual, I guess, toes on the paws there. Now we are going to have another paw coming out towards the front here. You're not going to see the shoulder as it's behind the rest of the body. So I'm just going to have a little line coming out like this. And another oval shape towards the front here. Same size as this one roughly. At the front. And then you can also drop in your small ovals for the individual toes on this claw here. And you're going to want to drop a 5th toe towards the back of your oval here for the dew claw. Now at this point, we've got a little bit of structure at this part of the body here. There's going to be a bit of a twist, and then his hips are going to sit about here. So I'm going to loop up a small area or a small oval towards the back section here. Like this. Now this is going to run in the opposite way to the front of the body because we're seeing sort of the opposite side of our curve. So this is our central line and it twists in the middle. So you're seeing a little bit less of the front portion of the body on that side and a larger portion exposed on the right here. And the opposite is true for our hip section there. Now from here I like to drop in the thigh area for one of our back legs, one of our hind legs, following our circle around and just dropping in almost like a large oval jelly bean sort of shape, just coming around from the back and down and then curving back up and into that oval again, and that's going to give you the back thigh. Don't be scared to make this too big. Again, they've got really large features. Now in terms of dropping in the back paw, I'm going to come slightly to the left of the front of this curve that we did. Drop in another oval shape like this for another paw, and you can put in the individual toes on this one as well. Like that, and that little oval is just going to link back up into the leg. So at this point, if you want to, you can just drop in a little line for the back of the foot there, if that makes things clearer. So at this stage, we're going to look at mapping out some of the details on our face here. So to do that, we'll start with our eyebrow sections here. So coming into our little jelly bean shape, I'm going to loop around the front like this, and I'll make these lines slightly darker than they need to be to make it a little bit more obvious what's happening. And I'm going to flick up like that, cutting into it. I'm going to overlap again with another line, and I might do a third one sort of coming back like this. And then you can wrap around from the back of the eye forward. And then you're going to do these little overlapping lines coming forward. So they're just going to be like little hair lines that come forward. And you're going to see that a lot in these designs. So I'm going to illustrate this a little bit larger on the side here because you're going to use this technique quite a bit. Every time I refer to these little overlapping hair lines, that's basically what you're doing, right? You're overlapping these little lines to create a fur texture. And you're going to use this a lot throughout this design, and you'll probably find that I use this a lot when doing any of these sort of designs where there's supposed to be soft fur areas. Now from here, you're going to come forward from that eyebrow section with another curve. It's going to come to about center where the bridge of the nose is, and then loop back up like this. It's going to be like a little fold. You can come out from the other side of your nose bridge there with another curve. And this is the curve that's actually going to go into the top of the head. So that's going to dip in slightly, come back out for the top of your head. And then if you want, you can just dip in and come back out like that. That will give you the shape for the top of the head there. For that outer curve that we did, you're going to do the same thing with these little hair textures, just coming around like that. Now for the bridge of the nose, you don't want a dead straight line coming down, so I like to just add a little bit of texture to it. Just adding a little bit of a wavy line to it will help give it a little bit more character, make it look a little bit more like scrunched up flesh. Bringing the nose into play now, so we're going to basically do a dark circle here that comes down into a line, and on the other side the same thing. You can make it slightly smaller. Now when you line these, or when you ink them, you're basically pressing nice and hard with your liner and then dragging it down and flicking it off, and that's going to give you that taper. And that's something I find, that's a technique I find especially useful when doing Japanese style designs. So you're going to bring lines up from either side of the nose and around, dipping in slightly at the middle of the nose at the top, like that. And then coming around the other side in the same way, like this. Okay, that's going to give you your nose shape. Now our muzzle is pretty much already drawn in. I'm just going to strengthen up some of my lines here so that they're a little bit more obvious. Now it's at this stage, if you'd like, you can go ahead and add in some whiskers. I'll just drop in a few lines like this. Now to actually draw in your eye, I'm pretty much going to use that whole oval that we did for our eye shape. I'm going to cut the back off of it slightly with this little this little curved line that comes up to create like a little triangle at the back of the eye. Bring that around and forward and just add a little loop in at the front of the eye like that. Now for the actual eye itself, it will pretty much stay like that. You can go ahead and drop in a circle for your iris and another circle in the center of that for your pupil. Okay, now looking at doing the top row of teeth and the top part of the mouth here, I'm going to come to the end of my muzzle area here and do a line that curves up. It's an S curve that curves up like this. And then you can start dropping in your top teeth. So just coming up to this first fold in our muzzle here, I'll drop down a nice big curved tooth like that. Coming up from there, you can put in some smaller teeth, which are just like little oval shapes. You can make them slightly pointy if you'd like to. Then come up again and add in another big tooth at the end there, another big pointy tooth. I'll come back to the point where it joins into our secondary line here and maybe add in another tooth like that. That'll be that top row of teeth for our tiger here. For the bottom sort of section of the jaw, you can pretty much bring a curve around for this bottom lip, like this. We're going to wrap that up and we're going to do it in a wavy sort of fashion. So we're going to dip in, back out, back in, back out, and then joining up into the bottom of our jaw there. And now we can add in our teeth for our bottom jaw. So coming into this first dip of the lip here and adding in a big sharp tooth like this. And I'll add in another small one behind that as well. You can come forward with your little oval shapes to drop in your smaller teeth, and then coming to the outside portion of the lip here for another larger tooth at the front. Now adding in your tongue, you're basically going to do a little curve towards the front like this. That's going to come through and wrap up back and through the mouth like that. You're going to draw a center line coming down the front of the tongue. Imagine it coming back up and around in towards the back of the mouth. Then you can draw the other side of your tongue just by adding a wavy line coming up, and then the other side of your open mouth with a curved line like that. Now from here I'm going to turn my page slightly. This will give me a better angle where I can work on the bottom sort of section of the jaw there. You're basically going to use that little curved line that we drew, and you're going to come down straight on that line or curving around with that line. And then you're going to wrap the bottom oval of the chin in the same way you did the top of the eyebrow there, with those little overlapping lines for a sort of softer fur texture coming around. And then you can do the same thing for the back portion of the jaw. So just starting at the back here, doing these little fur textures that wrap around and eventually link up into that bottom line that we drew. That'll give you that line around the base of the jaw. you can come up a little bit into this intersecting portion of our ovals, and you can actually add in another row of fur texture. This will help split the face up a little bit and also just give it a little bit more fur texture. Now for drawing in our ear, that's pretty straightforward. You're going to come down the top with a solid line, like this. Coming back around with a little bit of a curve line, just adding in some bumps for texture at the bottom of the ear. Now you're going to split that top section up into two using a line like this, so it's folded over itself. And then from the inside of the ear around, you're going to add those little fur textures just coming out and around from the inside of the ear, like this. Now from here, what I want to do is I want to draw in the top shoulder here, or the right shoulder here, so I can then link the head up into the rest of the body using some fur texture. So I'm going to come in from underneath our ear, come forward for our shoulder shape there. You can cut in and back a little bit. Now it's very hard to describe this, and it takes me a fair few tries before I'm happy with these line shapes. But when I'm doing Japanese style illustration, especially tigers and creatures like that, there's a certain shape you do with the lines. It's almost like this wavering line, and it's not wavy enough to where it looks purposefully wavy. It's almost just wavy enough to define that that part of the flesh or that part of the fur isn't completely smooth. So it's got this wavering sort of quality to it that gives it a little bit more of a traditional style look, and it just makes it look like that part of the body has, that's the shoulder bone sitting under there, and then there's some flesh or muscle that's sort of hanging down from there. So it gives you this little bit of a textured look to it. And to link this up with the rest of the body, you're going to do fur textures at the front of your shoulder coming down to the underside of your neck here. So I'll start with these fur textures coming forward, and then I'll drop down from there and do them coming around. And this will look like the big sort of tufts of hair that's underneath the neck of our tiger. Okay, coming around for the rest of our claw here. So I'm going to start probably where the shoulder cuts off into the rest of the arm. And I'll start adding in some fur texture coming up onto the body. That gives us the top of our shoulder. You can break off from this with a little W curve or an M curve coming towards our elbow shape. And then I want to wrap our elbow with these small curves. So starting at the back of our elbow, adding in our fur texture all the way around to join into the rest of our arm there. And I probably brought that in too narrow, so I'll just bring that out a little bit more. Like that, with the fur textures. And then you can start to bring in your paw. I like to draw this section of the paw before I bring the arm up. So we're going to draw in a little claw for each of the toes. Now the method for doing this is going to be the same for each and every claw on your design. So you can pretty much follow this same technique, just adding in a little curved peak at the front of each of your ovals. This will give you your claws like that, or your individual talons. And then you can pretty much add in a toe shape. So the way we're going to do this, I'll do it nice and big here so you can see. Let's say that is your claw shape there. You're pretty much going to come around the top with those little overlapping fur textures. Towards the top of the toe, you can come back with an S curve like this. And then you're going to wrap around the bottom pretty much with a smooth line for each of the toes. And that's going to complete the sort of toe shape. Now, once you get to the paw pad section on your last toe here, you can pretty much bring that around and up like this with a little S curve at the end there. I'll do the same thing just coming in from behind it. Another wavering sort of line that links up into a bit of an S curve, and that will be the back portion of our foot or our ankle area there. From the other side, you can add just a wavering line coming up into the shoulder section. And then to link up the back section of our forearm here, I like to just add in this wavering line. Again, it's going to show a little bit of the muscle structure there and help sort of define things while keeping everything loose and furry. Now you're basically going to repeat the steps from the bottom section of this claw onto the front paw here. Okay, once you've drawn in the front paws there, you can start to add in some of your body structure. So we're going to come into the top area of our head. I'm going to add in another curved line like this, which will just be like a little fold in our neck skin there, because we're going to have a lot of neck skin on this guy. And then we're going to come in from the front section of this curve towards the center with a slightly wavering line that just comes in towards center like this. And then to join that top section to the back section here, I like to do a couple of sort of smaller bumps and then just join that in with a curve like that. So it's almost like this wavering line that joins into our front line here. For the other side of the body, I'm going to come out from the back of the elbow here, and we're going to come a fair bit wider than our ribs here, because of course you're going to have layer of fat, layer of fur. So we're going to come out just a couple of sort of curves like this, like an M curve, and then we'll bring that in, flicking off into a small S curve sort of shape. And then you can come pretty much out and around the back shape of your oval at the back here. Okay, so just curving around it, and you want to have this little gap in between so it stops and then comes back out into the back of your body there. Now from here, if you'd like, you can link it into your tail. So I like to just come around from the back of our butt here, coming straight into our tail, following that line up, just strengthening it. And then you can come from the bottom section. Now I like to add a little bit of our fur texturing towards the bottom here, just to help fatten things out a little bit towards the base. Then you can come out, and the taper is going to get slightly wider towards the end of the tail. And at the end, it can just loop around like this. So you have this nice smooth circular end to your tail. Now for doing your back thigh here, I'm going to drop in a little circle towards the front and another little circle next to it like this, and another even smaller circle towards the right. So the three circles are basically going to represent how our line is going to move. So it's going to come around the front of our first circle nice and smooth. It'll dip in slightly between these circles, coming back out, following our second circle there. And then that's just going to come back and loop into the body, flicking off at the end. For the other side, it's going to do basically the same thing, wrapping around, dipping in slightly between our two circles, coming out again. And then for this section at the back here, I'll just erase it slightly. I'm just going to add in some of our fur texture to the back portion of our thigh there. Now from here, you can drop in the claws on your back paw here. And that's basically going to be done in the same fashion as your front claws. There's no difference here. Now when you get to your last claw on this side, you wrap it around the bottom for that last toe. Come out again. And then once you pass that area, you can bring it up into a little S curve, just sort of flicking off into the leg. I like to add in a little M curve for the back of the paw section here. You can add in some more fur texture at this point to help sort of break things up. Now for this back section that comes up into our tail, that's going to drop down. I'll drop a curved line down towards our thigh like this, and then overlapping with that, another line like that. That's going to give us the back section of our ankle. Now, in terms of doing our sketch, that is basically it for this one. You could go ahead and add a background to this if you'd like to, maybe some flowers or some rocks and waves. You guys will have to let me know in the comments down below right now if you would like to see me do a Japanese tiger with a background. So maybe a half sleeve, a calf piece, or a big back tattoo or something like that. You'll have to let me know down below if you want me to show you guys how to design something like that. However, I think there's enough detail to go into for this one today. So we're going to jump into the painting portion of this, and let's go. Now, I do want to make a quick note that the class notes for this design are available for members in your YouTube membership area. So if you go to your class notes folder, you'll see all of the layout for this one. Okay, so I've got our tiger outlined here. I've done all of the line work with a 0.5 and a 1.2 fine liner. And I'll just quickly talk about lining a little bit. So when I'm doing all my fur textures, I used a 0.5. And basically you press the nib down onto the page and then you whip it off. You press it down, you whip it off, you press it down and you whip it off. And what that will do is it will have the ends of all of your fur texture lines a little bit thicker, and then it'll whip off into a slightly thinner line. That's what gives you that really nice line variation with a lot of these Japanese style designs. For doing the main parts of the body, I used a 1.2. This was just to fatten up those lines and help them stand out as crucial sort of outline areas. And then pretty much all other broken lines and all of the lines in the face were done with a 0.5. So getting into painting this one, I will run you guys through my palette. I've got a different palette set up here today. I'm using a few different colors that I've actually mixed. We're not using any sort of plain colors aside from our red and green here. So let's start down this end with our brown. We're not doing any black shading for this one either, which is interesting. We're using brown for our dark tones. So this brown is made up of 4 drops of our yellow orange azo in our Liquitex ink range and a drop of dioxazine purple. This is a mix of 6 drops of our yellow orange azo, 1 drop of pyrrole red, and 1 drop of dioxazine purple. So this gives us almost an in-between. So we've got like a dark brown and then a brown that goes more into like an orange range. That will be our main body of color. I've got blue, this is phthalo blue, and I've just watered down half a drop of phthalo blue with some water to give us a really light blue. This is solid pyrrole red, and I've got a little bit of sap green. These are all Liquitex acrylic inks. Along with this, I've got 3 brushes for painting our design. I've got a number 1. These are all Taklon synthetic watercolor brushes. So I've got a number 1 for doing some of the fine detail in the face. I've got a number 6 for doing sort of the, in-between areas. Pretty much is like a versatile brush throughout the whole thing. And I've got my larger number 8 for doing large blends and larger areas. Now, usually I have a number 5 for smaller designs, but because this design is quite large, these are the brushes that I've chosen. I've also got a glass of water for washing the brushes out and to help blending some of the colors. And along with this, I've also got a couple of brush pens. I wanted to give you guys a couple of examples. So I've got a Finalizing brush pen, which is a legitimate brush. So it's got bristles on the end of it and is filled with ink. So there's an ink reservoir in here. And I've also got a Copic brush multi-liner. So this has a foam brush tip, and that's obviously filled with ink. And this gives you a little bit more control than a standard brush. This gives you a more natural brush look for the Finalizing here. Now with our Copic multi-liner, the main thing about this one is it's waterproof because it's an alcohol-based marker. This one, however, is not. This is a Sumi water-based ink. So it depends how you want to work. I like to do my stripes at the end, my tiger stripes at the end. So it doesn't really matter which one I use. I'll probably go with the Copic multi-liner just for that added touch of control. However, if you want to do your stripes before your color, you're not going to want to go with something water-based, because as soon as you start using your acrylic inks with water, you'll reactivate your water-based brush marker and it'll go everywhere. I've made that mistake before. Don't make it. Alright, so to actually start painting this one, we're going to start with our darkest tone. This is the same as what we do with our black shading normally, and it's the same thing that we do with tattooing as well. You always start with your darkest colors. So we're not doing any black shading specifically for this one, so I'm going to go into my brown that I made. This is the dioxazine purple mixed with our yellow orange azo, and I'm going to come in just underneath the face here towards the front of this claw with a little bit of our brown, and I'll just take my blending brush and blend that out gently. This is going to be like our base tone that sits underneath our orange color and adds in those darker sort of parts of the fur. Coming around to the front area of this shoulder here, I'm going to add in some of my brown, just coming around. In fact, I'll turn my page to make things a little bit easier, and I'll add in some of this brown around the base of the shoulder there and blend that up and out. Nice long even strokes to get a smooth blend like we always do. And don't worry too much, this will sit underneath this sort of faded cream color is going to sit underneath your orange brown tone. So we're going to bring a little bit more of our dark brown underneath the shoulder here onto the paw. There'd be a shadow underneath here where the forearm starts, so you can bring a little bit of your darker color under there. And blend that out. Nice long even strokes again, trying to get this as smooth as possible. Now you've really got to play around with control in the amount of water in your brush. If your brush has too much water on it, then it'll be hard to control on the page because you'll get too much water moving the ink around everywhere. If you don't have enough water on your brush, it's going to be very dry and difficult to move around. So just play around with that. The back of the muscle here, like the tricep muscle here, a little bit of brown. And we can just blend that out and through. I'm going to come in off this line of the shoulder here as well, the outer part of the body, and add in just a little bit of brown. Now, just like black shading, you want to be careful to sort of not add too much. You want to add enough contrast to your design without adding too much dark areas around the edges of things. You want to leave enough space. Coming into the other side of our ribs here, just going to come in with some brown like this. This is where it wraps around the body. And you can blend that out as well. And you're basically going to work your way around the body, adding in these darker areas wherever you think they're necessary and wherever you'd like them to be. Now, I'm not going to add any brown to this side of the body because our center line, which I've done in a very light pencil, I hope you can see it, comes up and wraps around. So there's going to be brown coming off of that center line. I don't really want to add too much brown to this section. We want to be able to fit a lot of our orange in there as well. Coming off the front of my thigh muscle onto where the knee sits. Now the next most important element on the body here is going to be the brown down the middle of the body. So we're going to take some of our darker brown and I'm going to come down our center line of the cat here. So I've actually done it in pencil so it's a little bit easier to follow. I'll come down our center line like this, all the way up to where the tail starts with our darker shade of brown, and then take some water and blend that out. You want to work fairly quickly here so as to not let the ink dry. But once you've got that center line blend started, you can then take your time in slowly blending that out nicely. Get a little bit of fresh ink on your brush here and just come down the other side of that line, adding a little bit of ink to sort of re-wet it. And then take your blending brush and blend that out the other side. So you want to have like this nice dark stripe of color down the center, and this is where you're going to blend your orange off of. Now I do want to have a little bit of brown coming up onto the tail here, so I can just come up from the center and start to bring it up the tail. I bring it up to about there, and then you can blend that out. Remember not to oversaturate your design with this darker brown because we are going to go in with a lighter color and you don't want too much of this brown happening in there. So I'll just come in under the eye here, to the bridge of the nose, and blend that out and forward like this, and underneath our eye a little bit. So you wanted these sort of dark shades where there's sort of creases in the face, in the flesh on the face, and where it would be a little bit darker, you can add these darker shades. Now that is basically our black shading, or in this case our brown shading done. We can go ahead and start applying our orange tone. So I've just washed my brush out and going into my brown orange color here. And I'm going to just lay that directly over the top of my brown. So in the same way that we would do black shading and then color straight over the top of it. And then you can start to blend that out and you'll get this really nice, vibrant sort of orange tone. I'm going to bring that down into the tops of the paws. Now some people like to leave their paws white. I like to sort of blend it from an orange down to a white for some of the areas of the paws, but I do like to have a little bit of orange in there. Now coming down to this section, water to blend out those areas down onto the top of our paw here. And start to work that color up. So because we're doing these large areas of fill, I like to have a slightly larger brush to do them. Now those softer tufts of fur on top of the shoulder and where the elbow is, I want them to look slightly more white. So I'm going to leave them uncolored. We'll come over the top of our little muscle at the back here and start to just blend that out a little bit as well. Now I'm going to come in with my orange color here through the center of the body. Again, you're going straight over the top of your brown shading there, all the way up the back of the body, the same way we did the center there. And then you can take some water on your blending brush and start to work that out towards the edges, like this. This will give you a really, really nice transition between a really dark sort of tone, a nice burnt sort of orange tone, or caramelized sort of orange tone, and through to your lighter sort of tones, yellows and into whites. I think that gives you a really nice transition using this particular blend of colors. You just got to try and be mindful of how your paper's taking the ink. You don't want to overwork your paper either. I'm going to have that pretty orange all the way up, blending out towards the end. The end's going to be black anyway, so we don't have to stress about that too much. And then blending into the back of the thigh there. Now once you're happy with the overall tone of your body here, we're going to start working in on the face a little bit. So I'm switching over to my number 1, and I'll be using the number 6 for blending and shading. Okay, so coming into the face here, we're going to go in with Pyrrole Red. And I'm going to use that for the little sections on either side of the eye. There's like these little fleshy parts on either side of the eye. I'm going to come in from the top of the nose with a little bit of Pyrrole Red, not too much. Then take my blending brush and work that red down to a pink for the nose. And you'll do the exact same technique for the areas of gum on your design. So just coming in with red from the top and then blending it down to a pink for the gum sort of areas in your mouth there. Now you're also going to use this same technique of blending red to pink on the inside of the ear. So just adding a little bit of red in at the top of the ear there, and then blending it down and through the larger portion of the ear. And then for the inside of the mouth, we're going to do Pyrrole Red solid, but we're leaving some little gaps around the edges of our lines. So just coming up to the first line of your tongue, that outer fold, and leaving a little white gap along the edge, painting back from that gap. And you'll do that just avoiding your teeth. That's why we use such a small brush, is to be careful in avoiding things that we don't want to paint. You do the same thing for the tip of your tongue, just leaving a gap along that outer edge, and I might leave a gap on that inner edge as well. And then I'll come straight off the inner edge for the other side and leave a gap on the outer edge of the tongue like this. For the inside portion of the tongue, you'll do the same thing, leaving a white gap down the center portion of the tongue where we have that center vein, and painting back from it. Moving forward to the next section to do the same thing, leaving a little white strip along the edge of the tongue. And for the back inside part of the mouth, you will do the same thing. Now the technique that we use to paint the nose, the gums, and the inside of the ear can also be used on your paws by taking a little bit of Pyrrole Red underneath each of your claws and then blending it back to a pink to give you the fleshy part on the underside of the paw. Basically the paw pad is going to have a slight more pink tone to it. So you can add a little bit of red just underneath your claw and then work on blending that back to a pink to give you that fleshy section underneath the paw pad. And you can blend that up to white to join it into the rest of the paw. You're basically going to use that technique for all of your claws. Now the last thing I'm going to do with my Pyro Red is come into the back of the eye here with a little line like this, very thin. And then I'm going to gently blend that around and forward towards the center. Okay, from here I'm washing out my number 1. We're not using Pyro Red anymore, that's finished. Now we can come in with our very light blue tone. So this is the blue that's been mixed with water. I'll get a little bit of that on the tip of my brush. And I'm going to start by just coming into the bottom of my claws with this light blue. You want it to be super light, like barely visible light. So maybe start at the base of the claw, rinse your brush a little bit, and then bring that forward. And I'm leaving the very top line of the claw white, just with the paper. So only doing the underside of the claws with this light blue. And it doesn't seem important, but it certainly does make a difference to the final product. Another section we're going to use that light blue in is the muzzle area. So I just want to add a little bit around the back of our muzzle here. Rinse off my brush and just gently blend that forward towards our nose. And you only want the slightest amount of blue. It does make a difference, but it's barely sort of visible. So just blending that forward towards your nose. Now the last bit of color we're going to do before getting into the stripes is a little bit of sap green in the eye. So I'm basically going to take the smallest amount of sap green, put that towards the top of the eye on either side, then rinse my brush out and just gently blend that around like this. I'll leave a little bit of a white gap at the top just for a little highlight like that. Alright, so you can go ahead and put away your brushes now. We are in the final step of making this thing actually look like a tiger, because at this stage it's like a weird cougar thing. We're going to be using our brush marker. Like I said, this is dry now. You could use a Fudensuke. I get a bit more control with this one. Now putting in the stripes is really a personal thing. This just comes down to playing with your design and figuring out what kind of stripes you like to put in there, you know, how big you like to make them and where you like them to sit. So this is going to take a lot of playing around to sort of get your shapes right. And there's no right or wrong here, you know, stripes are a pattern, a naturally occurring pattern, so there's not really any right or wrong, but I do think that there's a way to make them look good and just, you know, wrapping them around certain features on the body, but that will take a little bit of exploration in what kind of style of stripes you want to do. So I'm just going through here. I will run through my full process of adding stripes on screen here so that you guys get a good idea of how I like to approach it. And maybe that will give you guys a better idea of how you'd like to do your stripes as well. So coming onto the front paw here, adding some stripes that wrap down towards the front of the paw, like this. Maybe one just under there as well. And then when I reach like a shoulder portion, I like to add like a little bit of a swirl effect to my stripe. So I like to come around like this and fatten my stripe up towards the base there to add like a little swirl to it. And then you can always double up on that as well, just adding another swirl to your stripe. I think that looks kind of cool. Like this. We'll wrap some stripes from the back of the arm forward, just coming around. Now by pressing harder or lifting the pressure off a little bit, you can change the stroke thickness for your stripes here. That's why I use a brush marker for doing this. Of course you could use an actual brush and some ink for doing this as well. Nothing against doing that, I just find this a little bit easier to control. And, you know, lets you put a little bit more pressure on there as well, because you are using a foam nib as opposed to an actual brush nib for doing this. Now, the only part that's really important to get 100% accurate is the stripes coming down the center of the back. They're all going to start off this brown line, and they're going to come down either side of the body in a forwards direction if you're viewing it from this angle. And this is to get the sort of shape of the body right. So I'm going to come up to here and add a stripe there. And then from the other side, I'll come down as well like this. And then I'll continue this way up the length of the body adding my stripes down either side. This way you have like this arch section in the middle, and it really helps to define the spine, basically the center of the back. It really helps to define it and make it stand out a little bit. Now, as you can see, they start at more of a V shape and they start to get a little bit wider up the back here. That's just because you're seeing a more flat sort of angle on our back here. So I think that that's important as well, is to try and get a nice flatness to some of them as you reach up the back here. And that's going to give you a little bit more of a natural look as well. So now when I reach my thigh, I'm coming in again with some more sort of swirly shaped, spiral shaped stripes. So I'm going to bring this one up, and then I'll come up behind it, and I'm going to add in, maybe I'll go for an actual sort of spiral shape. I think that will look really cool, like that. And then of course you can sort of blend the shape a little bit more. So the last bit is going to be coming up onto our tail. I want them to sort of start more flat, and then I want them to start angling this way. So you have to try and start changing the angle of your stripes a little bit as you come up. Or you don't have to, this is the way that I like to do them though. Start changing the angle of my stripes slightly until they become more elongated, and follow the direction of the tail a little bit more, like this. And you can start to sort of block them together if you'd like, adding two stripes right next to each other. You can make some of them wider as well, completely up to you. Now the reason I like to start getting them on more of an angle is because towards the end of the tail, you're going to have this part that comes up like this, and then the end of your tail is going to be completely solid black. So you can just go ahead and fill that area in solid black like that. And then you've got to work on blending that back into the tail somehow. So I like to sort of already have this angle ready so that I can just bring lines up into it until it blends together. And I think that looks really cool. Once you've added your stripes, your tiger design is complete. That is it for today's video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this one. And for those of you that requested it, I hope you got out of it what you were hoping and that you learned something. And for everyone else, I hope you give this one a go and really enjoy drawing a Japanese style tiger. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next video. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. And I'll see you guys next time. Okay, bye-bye. If you like the content that I make and you'd like to support the channel, make sure you smash that like button. And hey, while you're at it, check out one of these other great videos.